What's up everybody, Yasin Nizami here. Thanks for joining my channel. In this video, we are going to touch upon the reasons behind rising inflation in Canada and pretty much across the globe. But we are focusing on Canadian economic dynamics, and we are going to talk about what are the reasons behind rising inflation and whether this is going to be persistent or is it going to settle at some point soon. So without further ado, let's dive in. So inflation is not an unknown scenario anymore. Pretty much in every news blog, any economic article or mainstream media, we are seeing inflation is one of the focus amongst all the business leaders and economists. What are the reasons behind rising inflation in Canada and pretty much, in the Western economies? So there are two reasons for rising inflation. Number one is the monetary expansion, which we have seen in the last 2 years, where the central bank has pumped billions of dollars into the real economy, whether directly or indirectly, financing the fiscal deficit from the government or expanding the lending capacity through commercial banks. So we're going to talk about that. And also the other reason is the global supply chain disruption that has been created as a result of government's response to the pandemic. So let's talk about the number one reason. So we have seen in the last 2 years, whether this is Federal Reserve, ECB, Bank of Japan, or Bank of Canada, they all did the same thing. All they did was they increased the monetary expansion, the money supply into the economy via two different routes. Number one is financing the fiscal deficit. So for example, federal government has run around $356 billion of fiscal deficit to support the fiscal spending into the economy, and all of that fiscal deficit was financed by Bank of Canada by printing new money out of thin air. Now that was one way to do that. The other way they expand the monetary supply is through commercial banks. We have seen in my last video, we talked about that. The number one reason why we're seeing the frothiness in the real estate market is because of the excess lending that has occurred in the last 2 years or so, and pretty much 78% of the mortgage residential market is covered by the big six banks in Canada. So there were two routes that they followed to increase the monetary expansion. Number one was financing the fiscal deficit, $356 billion, and then the commercial bank lending capacity that has expanded exponentially to basically fuel the housing boom in Canada. And also it was the same scenario in US as well. So that was one reason why we're seeing rising consumer prices pretty much across the board, whether this is food prices, electronics items, clothing, and also shelter as a result of that. The number two reason was global supply chain issues. Let me remind you one thing. This did not happen because of the pandemic. It happened because the government response to the pandemic. The way all these major governments, whether this is US government, Canadian government, or European countries, the way they responded to the pandemic was, I would say, stupid. Okay, and let me explain how. Because when the first wave hit, everybody was scared and panicked because they did not know how to deal with this kind of disease. I think it was okay and it makes sense to take extraordinary measures and protect yourself and keep yourself away from crowded places. But after 2 years, I think the situation is completely changed. People know how to manage themselves, protect themselves in terms of controlling the spread of the virus. But the way the governments are reacting to these kind of new variants is because they are shutting down the entire economy. Like when you lock down people, when you lock down businesses, and making travel a misery, it is not helping to revise the economy, right? The economy is already struggling. Like I can give you one example. I'm traveling today, and the overall traveling experience has become a nightmare. You gotta have PCR done before you get on board on the plane. Then when you arrive on your destination, you have to get another antigen test at the airport. And mind you, if God forbid the test result come out as positive, your entire travel is screwed. You cannot travel at all, okay? And then when you're coming back to Canada, you need to get PCR done at the country that you're coming from. Then when you arrive in Canada, you have to get antigen test again. If it comes out positive, then you have to quarantine yourself or isolate yourself. I don't know how these policies are not clear yet, but this was started last week by the Ontario government. So what I'm trying to say is the overall travel experience has become a nightmare. Literally, it is so difficult to travel these days because of all these measures. And why are they doing it? Is because they don't want to overwhelm the healthcare system. Okay, I get it. Healthcare system should not be overwhelmed because of, extraordinary load. But at what cost? I think whenever you start a project, you compare the cost benefit analysis. Okay, you see, okay, what is the cost and what is the benefit? If the benefit of the outcome is not outweighing the cost, then it's not a viable project to start with. Okay, but what we are seeing here, all these governments policies and their approach to combat pandemic is lock down everybody, shut down all the businesses, especially small medium businesses, which are being wiped out, because you can see all the support is going towards the big corporations like Amazon and Walmart. They're not getting shut down. They never got shut down during the pandemic, but the small medium businesses like 1-person shop or 2-person businesses, they have been completely wiped out. So what I'm trying to say is the cost of avoiding people to not gather anywhere or to basically stop overwhelming the healthcare system is enormous. The amount of mental stress that people are getting right now, like travel is becoming a mental stress now. With 2 kids, you can imagine how difficult it is to travel to anywhere in the world. And you can imagine the travel industry, like the airlines, the hotels, and the countries who are relying on the tourism for the economy, they are being completely destroyed. Okay, so understand these things. When these governments bring out these measures to lock people into their homes and then shut down all the businesses, and then handing out these stimulus checks to increase their purchasing power out of thin air, what it is going to do, it is going to drive in consumer prices, and it is going to add shortage of the labor, because when you're incentivizing people to just stay at home, why would they have to go out and then look for work? Because they don't need to. If I'm getting $2,000 check at home and I'm on minimum wage, I don't have to go out and then work because I'm getting paid without doing anything. So that's the incentive, that's the behavior that the government has been driving, and I think this is contributing towards the much higher rising consumer prices, and also the labor shortage, which is actually adding fuel to the fire. I'm literally frustrated because when I'm looking at these policies from the government, because now people understand how to deal with this kind of pandemic. People are intelligent enough to protect themselves. They don't have to force people to stay at home. They don't have to force businesses to shut down, because that is collapsing the economy. The economy is already struggling. I don't think how they can keep pumping the money to kickstart the economy by printing this money, this extra monetary expense. If you don't have environment to support economy, those measures are not going to help. So I'm traveling to a country called Pakistan. If you don't know, I'll update you in my next video, and I can show you how the people in Pakistan are reacting to this pandemic. And you'll be surprised that people are over there chilling, and there is no lockdown or no concept of keeping businesses shut down. You'll be surprised to see how things are being managed over there. So like this video, give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and then I will see you in my next week video. Take care.